Good afternoon. Thank you, Archbishop Kurtz. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds and Judge Long. Um, as was indicated earlier, I have prepared a report, and I'm going to provide some brief comments today on that, on the report and the project itself. At the request of the Archdiocese, I examined their files and other documents related to reports of child sexual abuse, including their policies and procedures that are outlined in the pamphlet Restoring Trust. I looked at all the reports, whether substantiated or not, on diocesan priest files. This did not include, I think it's been alluded earlier, the religious order files, which I think the Archdiocese will address separately. So basically, I ended up with two types of records in terms of the records. The first was the priest personnel records, and the second was a victim survivor file, which contained a copy of the report of the child's sexual abuse, along with other documents, oftentimes counseling documents, some perhaps legal documents and other documents. There were over 400 files and tens of thousands of pages of documents that I reviewed. As I said earlier, I also reviewed the Archdiocese's policies and procedures related to prevention, reporting, and responding to child sexual abuse as resulted from the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People that was enacted in June of 2002. Throughout this process, the Archdiocese has emphasized my role as an independent investigator. In fact, at every meeting I've had with them, it has come up that my assessment and observations are and should be completely independent. I examined each and every document in each file, and I developed a preliminary report containing my observations and some preliminary recommendations. Most of the reports were adults reporting child sexual abuse from decades ago. Most of the priests were deceased. 22 priest files contained at least one substantiated report of child sexual abuse that is contained in the list in the report. 12 priests were either removed from the ministry or had their ministry restricted to a life of prayer and penance. 8 priests were prosecuted and convicted for various crimes, various criminal offenses involving children. Another 7 or 8 priests were investigated by the police, and no charges were brought, and there were no prosecutions. The files indicated that approximately 5 or 6 priests were responsible for the majority of child sexual abuse reports that I examined. Another probably 15 number of priests had only one report of child sexual abuse. The credible abuse reports extended back over 70 years. Through my analysis of the files and other information, I can say that currently there are no pending reports of child sexual abuse involving any priest in active ministry in the Archdiocese today. In considering the content of the files, several aspects were apparent to me. Before 2002, there were few reports in the files. The response was limited to psychological assessments and treatment, and the focus appeared to be on protecting the priest and not on the victim. Lawsuits and publicity in 2002 brought a larger number of reports, and again, these were adult reports of child abuse that had occurred many years earlier. Many of those reports indicated that the victim had not told anyone in authority at the time the abuse occurred. 2002 brought a volume of information about child sexual abuse in the Archdiocese. In June of 2002 and following, the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People came into existence by the Conference of Bishops and was incorporated as policy in the Archdiocese of Louisville. At that point, the number and nature of documents in the files changed significantly. The files then contained, or the documents contained therein, were the documents that were required by the Charter. For example, the files contained a code of conduct acknowledgement that each employee signed. a safe environment training acknowledgement that each employee signed indicated that they had attended the training. There were criminal history checks contained in the file. There were letters immediately removing priests from active ministry pending an investigation whenever there was a receipt of a report of child sexual abuse. There were transfer letters certifying that priests who were either coming in or going out of the diocese had no reports of child sexual abuse and had up-to-date criminal history reports. There were communications between the Archbishop and the parishes and schools about the status of priests who had been removed pending investigations. Every person making a report was directed to contact law enforcement, and the Archdiocese, separately on its own, also contacted law enforcement. All of that was presented to the Sexual Abuse Review Board for their independent analysis, and there were documents in file indicating their receipt of information as well as actions they took and findings that they made regarding those reports. The documents showed that there was a sea change shift in policy, procedure, focus, and transparency. People who reported abuse after the settlement in 2004, I believe, received a significant amount of counseling services provided by the Archdiocese, and some of those folks are still receiving counseling services today. A significant component of that change was the implementation of an audit or review process. The Archdiocese is regularly audited by an independent third-party agency for compliance with provision for protection of children that are contained in the Charter. The last document I reviewed was the letter of compliance dated September of last year, September 2018, confirming that the Archdiocese was in full compliance with all the provisions of the Charter. The documents after 2002 show an openness and willingness on the part of the Archdiocese to seek assistance from independent third parties. The Sexual Abuse Review Board provides that assistance regularly. The independent auditors who audit the Archdiocese for compliance with the Charter provide that assistance annually. In my document examination and my recommendations in this matter is another example of that willingness to receive outside assistance and input from an independent third party. So that concludes my remarks, and I'll be available as Brian indicated.